The painting beneath the dust sheet was her own face. Maeve Norrell stood in the west gallery of the Palazzo Kaine, with her cleaning cloth still in one hand and the corner of the heavy fabric in the other, staring at a portrait of a woman in Renaissance dress who had her eyes, her mouth, the exact curve of her jaw. The sunlight filtering through the shuttered windows turned the dust motes golden, and for a moment she thought she might faint. She had been told on her first day 3 months ago never to clean the west gallery. Signora Torrini, the head housekeeper, had been explicit. The gallery was private. It was locked. It was none of her concern. But this morning the door had been open, just a crack, and Maeve had seen the row of shrouded shapes lining the walls, and thought only that someone must have left it unlatched by accident. She was a maid. Cleaning was what she did. She had slipped inside. Now she pulled the dust sheet away entirely, and the paintings stared back at her in oils so old they had cracked in a fine web across the canvas. The placard at the bottom read 1658. Her hands were shaking. She turned to the next shrouded frame and yanked the cloth free. The same face, older in charcoal and chalk on prepared board, 1701. The next, a fresco fragment carefully preserved, the woman's profile turned toward a window, 1544. The next and the next and the next, pulling sheets away in a frenzy now, her breath coming fast and shallow. Every wall, every surface. Portraits in oil and tempera and ink, sketches in silver point, studies in red chalk. Some were half-finished, some were masterworks. All of them were her. She stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by her own face repeated 90 times across 400 years, and felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "You were not meant to see this," a voice said from the doorway. Maeve spun. The man standing there was tall and pale as marble, his hair white blonde and swept back from a face that could have been carved by Michelangelo. He wore a black suit tailored to perfection, and his eyes were the color of old silver. She knew who he was. Everyone in Florence knew. Quentin Kaine, the reclusive owner of the palazzo, the man who never appeared in daylight, who had owned this building and the vineyards surrounding it for as long as anyone could remember. Longer. "I'm sorry," Maeve stammered. The door was open. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said quietly. He stepped into the gallery, and she noticed he moved with unnatural grace, as though gravity affected him differently. "I left it open. I have been waiting for you to find it." Her back hit the wall. One of the portraits dug into her shoulder blades. "What is this?" Quentin Kaine walked slowly down the length of the gallery, his gaze moving over the paintings with the familiarity of long acquaintance. When he spoke, his voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as though he were discussing the weather. "I have painted your face for 400 years, he said. "Every decade, sometimes more often. I painted you in Florence during the plague. I painted you in Rome when the Baroque masters were still alive to critique my technique. I painted you in Paris, in Vienna, in Venice. I have painted you from memory in every medium I could master, and I have never been able to stop." Maeve's mouth had gone dry. "That's impossible, is it?" He turned to face her fully, and she saw that his eyes held no madness, no fever, only a deep, bone-weary certainty. "Look at me, Maeve Norrell. Look closely. What do you see?" She looked. Pale skin that had never seen the sun. Eyes too bright, no rise and fall of breath in his chest. The temperature in the gallery had dropped since he entered, though he stood 10 feet away. "You're a vampire," she whispered. "Yes." He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that belonged to another century. "I am Quentin Kaine, and I have been the king of this city's night court for 312 years. And you are the great-great-great-granddaughter of the girl who saved my life in 1613. The world seemed to contract to the space between them. Maeve pressed her palm flat against the wall to steady herself. "I don't understand." "Sit," Quentin said, gesturing to a velvet bench near the window. "Please. This will take some time to explain, and you are pale." She sat because her legs would not hold her anymore. He remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, looking out through the shutters at the city beyond. "In 1613, he began, I was not yet king. I was barely a vampire at all, only 3 years turned, still learning the boundaries of what I had become. I made a mistake. I stayed out too long before dawn, pursuing a rival through the streets near the Ponte Vecchio, and the sun caught me in the open." His voice was distant now, remembering. "I would have burned. I had perhaps 30 seconds before the light would have killed me, and then a hand seized my wrist and dragged me sideways into darkness. A cellar door I had not seen. A girl, perhaps 17, with a face I had only an instant to glimpse before she shoved me down the stairs and slammed the door behind me. I never saw her again. I searched, of course, for months, years. But Florence was large, and the poor did not keep records. I never learned her name." He turned back to Maeve, and there was something raw in his expression now. "But I remembered her face, every line, every detail. It burned itself into my memory in that one moment when she looked at me, and I could not forget. So I painted her. Once at first thinking it would exorcise the image, but it did not. I painted her again. And again. It became a compulsion, my curse perhaps, for the eternity I had been given. The face of the one human who saved me, preserved forever in pigment and canvas because I could not let it go. Maeve stared at him. The paintings stared back from the walls, silent witnesses. And you think I'm her? No. His answer was immediate, firm. I know you are not. You are her descendant. The resemblance is exact, but you are not the same woman. She was bold, reckless. She pulled a monster out of the sun without hesitation. You are careful, thoughtful. I have watched you these 3 months, Maeve Norrell. You clean as though you are learning the palazzo by heart, one room at a time. You speak kindly to the other staff. You bring bread to the stray cats in the courtyard. You are nothing like her, except in your face. Then why? Her voice broke on the word. Why show me this? Because you deserve to know the truth. He moved closer, still careful to keep distance between them. You have worked in my home for 3 months. You have felt the weight of eyes on you, have you not? The whispers among the court? She had. The other servants in the palazzo were human, but there were others pale. Beautiful people who moved through the halls at night and looked at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She had assumed it was paranoia, the old building getting into her head. The court knows about the paintings, Quentin said. They have known for centuries. Some of them believe the face is prophecy, that one day the woman in the portraits would appear in flesh and that she would be significant. They call themselves the Circle of the Face. They have been waiting for you. Maeve stood abruptly, the bench scraping against the floor. I need to leave. You do not. His voice was gentle but absolute. You are safe here. I am the king. No one will harm you, but I will not lie to you either. You have a right to know what you have walked into. I didn't walk into anything. The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with panic. I needed a job. The pay was good. I didn't ask to be part of some 400-year-old obsession. No, Quentin agreed. You did not, and if you wish to leave, I will arrange it. I will give you a reference, 6 months' wages, and a car to take you wherever you wish to go. You will never see me or this place again. She stared at him. Just like that? Just like that. Met her gaze steadily. I am many things, Maeve Norrell, but I am not a captor. You owe me nothing. The girl who saved me is 400 years dead. You are your own woman. Something in her chest loosened slightly. She looked around the gallery again at the endless repetition of her own features. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But there was something else beneath the fear, a strange magnetic pull toward the man standing before her, who had carried the memory of a stranger's kindness for 4 centuries and turned it into art. I need time, she said finally. To think, of course. Quentin inclined his head again, that old-world gesture of respect. You have all the time you need. The gallery will remain locked. No one will mention this to you unless you wish to speak of it. You may continue your work as though nothing has changed, or you may go. The choice is entirely yours. He walked past her toward the door, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. At the threshold he paused. For what it is worth, he said without turning, I am sorry. I never meant for this to touch you. I thought I could keep it contained. I was wrong. Then he was gone. And Maeve was alone with 90 versions of herself and a truth she had no idea how to carry. She did not leave. It would have been the sensible thing to do. Pack her bags, take the money, find another job in another city where vampire kings did not paint her face in secret galleries. But Maeve had been sensible her entire life. Sensible had gotten her through university on scholarships and part-time work. Sensible had kept her afloat after her mother died and left her alone in the world. Sensible was a survival mechanism, not a passion, and this, whatever this was, had ignited something in her that felt dangerously like passion. She stayed. She cleaned the palazzo's other rooms, polished the marble floors, dusted the priceless antiques, and at night when her shift ended and the other human staff went home, she lingered. She had always been the last to leave, preferring the quiet of the empty building. Now she knew she was not alone. Quentin found her in the library on the 4th night. She was curled in one of the leather chairs near the fireplace, reading a book on Renaissance art that she had pulled from the shelves. She looked up when he entered, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, a question. You stayed, he said. I'm still thinking, Maeve replied. It was not quite true. She had been thinking constantly, obsessively, turning over every word he had said in the gallery. But she had also been feeling, and that was harder to explain. Quentin moved to the chair opposite hers, settling into it with the grace of a cat. May I ask what you are reading? She showed him the cover. I wanted to understand the paintings better, the techniques. I don't know much about art. You do not need to know about art to understand them. His voice was quiet. They are not really about technique. They are about memory, about trying to hold on to something that is already gone. Maeve set the book aside. Tell me about her, the real her, not the face, the person. Quentin was silent for a long moment, his silver eyes distant. I saw her for perhaps 10 seconds in total. She pulled me into the cellar, shoved me toward the back where the shadows were deepest, and then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. I heard her footsteps running away. I never heard her voice. I do not know if she understood what I was. Or if she simply saw a man about to die and acted on instinct. But you loved her, it was not quite a question. No, the answer startled her. Quentin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. I do not think love is the right word. I was grateful, obsessed, haunted. But love requires knowing someone, and I never knew her at all. I loved the idea of her, perhaps. The mystery, the kindness. But the woman herself was always a stranger. Maeve's heart was beating faster. Then why keep painting her? Because I am a vampire, Quentin said simply. We do not let go. It is our nature. We hold grudges for centuries. We remember slights from before your great-grandparents were born. And we cling to the few moments of grace we are given, because grace is rare in the dark. She understood that. She had spent the last 3 years clinging to the memory of her mother's voice, replaying their last conversation over and over because it was all she had left. Grief was its own kind of vampirism. May I see them again? She asked. The paintings? Quentin's expression shifted surprise, followed by something that might have been hope. Are you certain? No, but I want to. He stood and offered her his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His skin was cool, not cold, and his grip was careful, as though he were holding something fragile. He led her through the darkened halls of the palazzo to the west gallery, where he unlocked the door with an old iron key. Inside, the paintings were still uncovered, her face watching from every wall. But now, with Quentin beside her, they seemed less like a haunted shrine and more like a confession. Tell me about this one, Maeve said, stopping in front of a portrait dated 1782. The woman wore a blue gown, and there was a faint sadness in her expression. That was in Vienna, Quentin said. I had just lost a friend, one of the few vampires I trusted. I painted that in a single night, trying to remember that kindness was real, that it had happened. And this one? She moved to a sketch in red chalk, loose and unfinished. Paris, 1889. The Exposition Universelle. The city was full of light and noise, and I felt more alone than I had in decades. I went back to my rooms and drew that from memory, trying to anchor myself. She walked the gallery slowly, and he followed, narrating each piece. Not the technical details, but the moments that had driven him to create them. Loneliness, grief, isolation. The paintings were not a shrine to a girl from 1613. They were a 400-year record of a man trying to remember that he had once been worth saving. By the time they reached the final painting, Maeve's throat was tight. She turned to face him. I'm not her, she said. I can't be her. I don't even know if I'm brave. I know, Quentin said. I do not want you to be her. I want to know who you are. Why? He smiled faintly. Because in 3 months of watching you, you have surprised me 14 times. The girl in 1613 surprised me once. I think I would very much like to be surprised again. Maeve felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest. She was falling, she realized. Falling for a vampire king who had spent 4 centuries painting her face without knowing her name. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was happening anyway. I need you to understand something, she said carefully. If we do this, if we see where this goes, I need you to see me. Not the girl from the cellar, not the prophecy the court thinks I am. Me, Maeve. The woman who burns toast and reads too much and cries at bad movies. Can you do that? Yes, Quentin said, and the certainty in his voice was absolute. I can do that, she believed him. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. They began carefully. Quentin was old and powerful, a king among vampires. But he courted her with a tentative gentleness that made her heart ache. He brought her books from his private collection, first editions and rare manuscripts, and left them in her quarters with handwritten notes. He walked with her through the palazzo gardens at dusk, when the sun had just set and the sky was still violet. He told her stories about the centuries he had lived, the cities he had seen, the art and music and literature he had witnessed being born. And slowly, carefully, he stopped painting her face. Maeve noticed after 2 weeks. The West Gallery remained locked, but when she asked, Quentin admitted he had not touched a brush or pencil since the night she had asked to see the paintings again. Why? She asked. They were in the music room, where a grand piano sat near the window. Quentin had been playing something by Debussy, and the notes still hung in the air. Because I do not need to anymore, he said. The paintings were memory, a way to hold on to something I could not have. But you are here. You are real. I would rather spend my time learning you than recreating a ghost. Maeve crossed the room and sat beside him on the piano bench. Play something else, something you wrote. I have not composed in a century. Then start again, he did. The melody was hesitant at first, searching, but it grew stronger as he played. Maeve leaned her head against his shoulder and listened, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was in love with him, completely, irrevocably. The kind of love that felt like falling and flying at the same time. But love, she was learning, was not simple. Especially not when it involved a 400-year-old vampire king and a court that believed she was a prophecy made flesh. The circle of the face made their move 6 weeks after Maeve found the paintings. She had been walking through the palazzo's lower halls. carrying fresh linens to the guest wing, when three figures stepped out of the shadows. They were vampires, pale and beautiful and utterly still in the way that only the undead could be. Maeve recognized one of them, a woman named Seraphina who served on Quentin's council. "Maeve Norrell," Seraphina said, her voice like silk over steel. "We have been waiting to speak with you." Maeve set down the linen slowly. "I'm working. If you need to speak with me, you can wait until my shift ends. This cannot wait." Seraphina stepped closer, her dark eyes intent. "You have been chosen. Surely you understand that by now." "Chosen for what?" "To fulfill the prophecy." Another vampire spoke now, a man with silver rings on every finger. "The face has returned. 400 years of waiting and the king's obsession has brought you to us. You are the vessel, the bridge between the old world and the new." Maeve's pulse quickened. "I'm not a vessel. I'm a maid." "You are so much more than that." Seraphina's voice was fervent now, almost hungry. "The circle has studied the paintings for generations. We have seen the patterns, the signs. Your arrival marks the beginning of a new age for our kind. But first you must undergo the rite, the binding." "What binding?" Maeve backed up a step, her shoulders hitting the wall. "The rite that will cement your place in the prophecy, that will make you one of us properly. Under the old laws, with the old words." Seraphina extended a pale hand. "Come with us. The king need not know until it is done. He has waited so long, we will give him the gift he has been seeking, even if he does not realize it yet." "No." Maeve's voice was firm. "I don't know what you think I am, but I'm not part of any prophecy. And if I choose to become a vampire, it will be my choice, not yours." The temperature in the hallway dropped. The three vampires exchanged glances, and Maeve saw something dangerous flicker in their expressions. "This is not a request," the male vampire said quietly. "The circle has waited too long. You will come with us now." Or what?" Quentin's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared at the end of the hallway, and the air itself seemed to bend around him. Maeve had seen him gentle and thoughtful, had heard him play piano and speak of art. But now she saw the king, the predator, the creature who had ruled Florence's night for 3 centuries. "Or nothing," Quentin continued, his voice dangerously soft. "Because you will step away from her immediately and you will explain to me why 3 members of my court are threatening my guest in my own halls." Seraphina's composure cracked slightly. "My lord, we meant no threat. We were merely explaining a binding rite that I did not authorize." Quentin moved forward with inhuman speed, placing himself between Maeve and the others. "Discussing a prophecy that I have never acknowledged. Touching what is mine without permission. The paintings," the male vampire began. "Are art," Quentin said coldly. "Nothing more. I am aware of the circle's interpretations, Draven. I have tolerated them because they seemed harmless. But the moment you decided to act on them without my knowledge or consent, you crossed a line that I do not permit anyone to cross, not even my council." Seraphina drew herself up. "The face is prophecy, my lord. The signs are clear. She is meant to do nothing except what she chooses." Quentin's eyes had gone completely silver, reflective and inhuman. "Maeve Norrell is a guest in my house. She is under my protection. And if the circle believes it has any claim on her beyond that, then the circle is wrong." The 3 vampires looked at each other, and Maeve saw the calculation in their expressions. They were old, powerful, but not powerful enough to challenge a king directly. "Of course, my lord," Seraphina said finally, inclining her head. "We apologize for any misunderstanding. It will not happen again." "No," Quentin agreed. "It will not. Because as of this moment the circle of the face is dissolved. You will cease all activities related to the paintings, the prophecy, or Maeve Norrell. If I hear otherwise, there will be consequences. Am I understood?" "Yes, my lord." They left, melting back into the shadows with the eerie silence of their kind. Quentin stood motionless until they were gone, then turned to Maeve. "Are you all right?" His voice had shifted back to gentleness, but she could still see the predator lurking beneath. "I think so." Her hands were shaking. What binding were they talking about? Quentin's jaw tightened. "An old ritual, one that requires the participation of the vampire king and a human chosen by the court. It is meant to create a bond, a connection that ties the human to the court's bloodline. They believed." He stopped, visibly controlling his anger. "They believed they could force my hand by presenting you as a fait accompli, that I would accept the binding because I had painted your face for so long. Would you have?" Maeve asked quietly. "No." He met her eyes and she saw the truth there, stark and unflinching. "I would never have agreed to it. The binding is not a gift, Maeve. It is a chain. It would tie you to the court, to me, in ways that would strip away your choice. I will not do that to you, even though they think I'm some kind of prophecy. You are not a prophecy. You are a woman, and I will not let my court turn you into a symbol." Maeve stepped closer to him, her heart pounding. "What if I wanted it? Not the binding, but the turning, on my own terms." Quentin went very still. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know yet." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "But I want the option. I want to be able to choose, without the court deciding for me. Without some 400-year-old painting making the decision." Just me choosing you if that's what I decide. His grip tightened on her hand, careful even in the intensity of his emotion. You have that option, you will always have that option. But Maeve, you need to understand what you would be giving up. Mortality is precious. It is brief and bright and irreplaceable. I would not ask you to trade it lightly. I know. She did. She had been thinking about it every night since she found the paintings, weighing the cost against the possibility of forever with a man who had waited 400 years to be seen. But I'm not making that choice today. I'm just saying I want it to be mine to make. It will be, Quentin promised, yours alone. But even as he said it, Maeve felt the weight of the court's expectations pressing down on her. The paintings, the prophecy. The circle that Quentin had just dissolved, but which represented decades or centuries of belief among the vampires of Florence. She was not naive. Disbanding a group did not erase the ideas that had created it. She was going to have to prove that she was more than a face. The opportunity came 2 weeks later, at the autumn equinox. Quentin had explained that the equinox was traditionally a night of gathering for the Florentine court, when vampires from across Italy came to the Palazzo Kaine to reaffirm alliances, conduct business, and celebrate the turning of the season. It was politics and pageantry in equal measure, and Maeve was expected to attend as Quentin's guest. The preparation alone was overwhelming. Signora Torrini had presented her with a gown that looked like it belonged in a museum, deep crimson velvet with gold embroidery, cut in a Renaissance style that emphasized her resemblance to the paintings. There were jewels, antique and heavy, slippers that pinched her feet, a hairdresser who spent 3 hours arranging her hair into an elaborate updo that made her neck ache. When Maeve finally looked at herself in the mirror, she saw the girl from the portraits. The resemblance was uncanny, deliberate. Whoever had chosen the gown had wanted her to look like prophecy made flesh. She hated it. She found Quentin in his study an hour before the gathering was set to begin. He was dressed in black, formal and severe, his white hair pulled back. He looked up when she entered, and something flashed across his face, recognition followed immediately by discomfort. You look, he began. Like the paintings, Maeve finished. I know, that's the point, isn't it? The court wants to see the prophecy, so someone made sure I'd look the part. Quentin stood abruptly. Who chose that gown? Signora Torrini brought it. She said it was traditional for the king's guest. Signora Torrini has been in this palazzo for 40 years. She knows the circle's beliefs. His voice was tight with anger. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid. Maeve looked down at the dress, at the jewels glittering against the velvet, and felt something cold settle in her chest. They're never going to see me as anything else, are they? As long as I have this face, I'm just going to be the girl from the prophecy. Yes, she met his eyes. You said you wanted to know me, the real me. But how can you, when I'm dressed like a Renaissance portrait and the entire court is waiting to see if I fulfill some 400-year-old fantasy? Quentin crossed to her in 2 strides and took her hands. Then do not wear it. Wear what you wish. Be who you are. I will stand beside you regardless. They'll be angry. Let them be angry. I am the king. My approval is the only one that matters. Maeve looked at him, at the fierce certainty in his eyes, and felt the cold in her chest begin to thaw. You mean that? I have never meant anything more. She made her decision in that moment. Wait here. She went back to her quarters and stripped off the crimson gown, the jewels, the elaborate hair. She took down the pins and let her hair fall loose. She put on a simple black dress, modern and clean-lined, that she had bought in a shop in the city center. No embroidery, no velvet, just her. When she returned to the study, Quentin's expression shifted to something she had never seen before, relief, pride, and underneath it a warmth that made her breath catch. Better? She asked. Perfect, he said. You look like yourself. They walked to the great hall together, and Maeve felt the weight of 100 eyes on her as they entered. The court was already assembled, vampires in period dress, jewels and silk, and a kind of beauty that was almost painful to look at. They watched her entrance in silence, and she saw the confusion ripple through the crowd. She did not look like the paintings. She looked like a modern woman in a simple dress, holding the hand of their king. Serafina was there, standing near the front with the remnants of the circle. Her expression was unreadable. Quentin led Maeve to the dais at the head of the hall, where 2 chairs had been prepared. He sat, and she sat beside him, feeling like an imposter. But when she glanced at Quentin, he gave her a small, encouraging nod. The evening proceeded with a formality that felt like theater. Vampires approached the dais one by one to pay their respects, to present gifts, to murmur polite nothings. Maeve smiled and nodded and tried not to feel like she was drowning. And then Serafina stepped forward. My lord, she said, her voice carrying through the hall, I must speak. Quentin's expression did not change, but Maeve felt him tense beside her. Proceed. Serafina turned to address the assembled court. For decades, the Circle of the Face has interpreted the king's paintings as prophecy. We believed that the return of the face would herald a new age for our kind. We prepared, we waited, and when Maeve Norrell arrived, We believed our waiting had been rewarded. She paused and the silence in the hall was absolute. But we were wrong, Serafina continued. Not about the significance of her arrival, but about its meaning. We sought to bind her, to make her part of our designs, because we believed the prophecy was ours to fulfill. But prophecy is not something we create. It is something we witness. And what I have witnessed these past weeks is not a prophecy, but a choice. She turned to Maeve directly now. You rejected the gown, the jewels, the role we tried to give you. You chose to be yourself rather than what we wanted you to be. That took courage. More courage than many of us have shown in centuries. Maeve's heart was pounding. She did not know where this was going, but she could feel the attention of the entire court focused on her like a weight. The circle believed you were meant to be bound to the king through ritual, Serafina said. But we failed to understand the most important truth. You are already bound. Not by magic or prophecy, but by choice. By the fact that our king, who has not loved in 400 years, has chosen you, and you have chosen him in return. She knelt, and the gesture sent a shock through the hall. Vampires did not kneel easily. It was an acknowledgement of power, of respect. I was wrong to try to force your path, Serafina said quietly. The circle was wrong. I ask your forgiveness. And I offer you this. The circle is dissolved as the king commanded. But in its place I offer you my loyalty. Not to the face, but to the woman who wears it. Maeve stared at her, speechless. Around the hall, other vampires were kneeling now, one by one, a wave of acknowledgement spreading through the court. Quentin leaned close and whispered, You do not have to accept. This is your choice. Maeve swallowed hard. She looked out at the sea of pale faces, beautiful and deadly, and watching her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. But beneath the fear she felt something else. Power. Not the kind that came from magic or prophecy, but the kind that came from standing in front of a room full of immortals and refusing to be anything other than herself. I accept your apology, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And I release you from the prophecy. There is no binding, no right, no circle. There is only me, Maeve Norrell, and whatever I choose to make of my life. Serafina raised her head, and there was something like relief in her eyes. Thank you. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Vampires approached to speak with her, no longer with the fervor of believers, but with genuine curiosity. They asked about her life, her work, her thoughts on art and music and the modern world. She was no longer a symbol. She was a person, and they were treating her as one. By the time the gathering ended and the court began to disperse, Maeve was exhausted. Quentin walked her back to her quarters in silence, his hand warm in hers. At her door he stopped. You were extraordinary tonight. I was terrified. I know. That is what made it extraordinary. He lifted her hand to his lips, a gesture from another century that should have seemed ridiculous, but instead made her heart race. You did not have to face them alone. You know that, yes? I know, but I needed to do it myself. To prove to them and to me that I'm more than a face in a painting. You are so much more, Quentin said softly. I have known that since the first week you were here, when you stayed late to help Signora Torini with the inventory even though it was not your responsibility. You are kind, you are thoughtful, you are brave. And he stopped, and Maeve saw the uncertainty in his expression. The same man who had faced down his counsel without flinching was hesitating now, unsure. You what? She prompted gently. I am falling in love with you, Quentin said. Not with the face I painted. Not with the memory of a girl from 1613. With you, Maeve. The woman who burns toast and cries at bad movies and chose to wear a simple black dress to prove she was more than a prophecy. I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me because I do not know if I can be what you need. I am old. I am a vampire. I have spent 400 years painting a ghost, and I do not know if I am capable of truly seeing the living. Maeve stepped closer until there was barely a breath of space between them. You see me. You have been seeing me. That's why I'm falling in love with you too. His eyes widened slightly. Maeve, she kissed him. It was not graceful or elegant, just a press of her lips against his, a declaration in physical form. He froze for half a second, and then his arms came around her, careful and sure, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her want to cry. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, or at least, she was. Quentin looked dazed, his silver eyes wide. Stay with me tonight, Maeve whispered. Just to talk. I don't want to be alone. Are you certain? Yes. They went inside, and Quentin sat in the chair near the window, while Maeve curled up on the bed, still in her simple black dress. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about the invention of the printing press, about hearing Vivaldi play violin in Venice, about the night he became a vampire, and thought his life was ending when it was only beginning. She told him about her mother, about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, about her dream of one day opening a bookshop. Somewhere near dawn she fell asleep mid-sentence, and when she woke hours later, Quentin was gone. But there was a note on the bedside table in his elegant handwriting. Thank you for last night, you are a wonder. She held the note to her chest and let herself feel the full weight of what was happening. She was in love with a vampire king. And somehow, impossibly, he was in love with her too. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Maeve's life. She and Quentin settled into a rhythm that felt natural. Despite its strangeness, her days spent working in the palazzo, her nights spent with him. They explored Florence together after dark, walking the streets that he had known for centuries while she pointed out the ways the city had changed. They debated art and literature and philosophy. They danced in the empty ballroom to music only they could hear. And slowly, gently, Maeve began to understand the weight of what it would mean to choose him forever. She thought about it constantly, the turning, what it would mean to leave behind sunlight and mortality, to become something other than human. Quentin never pressed her, never asked, but she could see the question in his eyes sometimes when he looked at her. A hope he was afraid to voice. She wanted to say yes, she did. But every time she tried to imagine it, she came up against the same problem. She did not want to be turned because of the paintings, because of prophecy or resemblance or 400 years of obsession. She wanted it to be a choice made in full knowledge of who she was and who he was, untainted by the past. The answer came to her one evening in the West Gallery. She had asked Quentin for the key, and he had given it without question. She stood among the paintings, looking at her own face repeated across the centuries, and realized something important: she did not hate them anymore. They were not a prison or a prophecy. They were a record of grief and memory, a testament to the fact that a single act of kindness could echo for 400 years. But they were not her, and they never would be. She found Quentin in his study and said, "I need you to get rid of the paintings." He looked up sharply. "What?" "Not destroy them," she clarified, "but give them away. Donate them to museums, sell them, scatter them across the world. I don't care, but I need them out of this house." "Why?" She sat down across from him, searching for the right words. "Because as long as they're here, I'm always going to wonder if you're seeing me or seeing her. I know you say you're not, and I believe you. But I need to prove it to myself. I need to know that when you look at me, you're not looking at 400 years of memory. Just me." Quentin was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If I do this, will you believe me?" "Yes." "Then I will do it, all of them. I will contact the galleries tomorrow." "Thank you." She reached across the desk and took his hand. "There's something else. I've been thinking about the turning, about what it would mean." His expression went very still. "And? I want it, not now, not immediately, but someday. When I'm ready, when I've lived enough of my human life that I won't regret what I'm giving up. But I want you to know that I'm choosing this, choosing you. Not because of prophecy or paintings or anything else, just because I love you." Quentin's grip on her hand tightened. "How long do you need?" "I don't know. A year, maybe more. I want to do things first, human things. I want to see the sunrise a few more times. I want to finish my degree. I want to visit my mother's grave and say goodbye properly." And then she smiled. "And then I want forever with you." "I can wait," Quentin said, and there was a rawness in his voice that made her chest ache. "I have waited 400 years. I can wait a little longer for you." They sealed the promise with a kiss, and Maeve felt the future unfold before her like a gift. But the past, it turned out, was not done with them yet. The revelation came from an unexpected source. Draven, the vampire who had been part of the Circle's attempt to bind her. He requested an audience with Quentin 2 months after the equinox, and Maeve was present when he arrived. "My lord," Draven said, inclining his head respectfully, "I come with information that I believe you need to hear. It concerns the paintings and the Circle's beliefs." Quentin's expression was cool. "Speak." Draven glanced at Maeve, then back to the king. "The Circle did not create the prophecy. We were taught it. For decades there was a vampire among us who claimed to have visions, dreams sent by the old magic. She told us that the face in the paintings was a sign, that the woman who bore it would return and herald a new age. We believed her. We built our rituals around her visions." "Who was this vampire?" Quentin's voice was dangerously quiet. "Mistress Leora. She served on your council 40 years ago, before she withdrew to the catacombs. She claimed the dreams were guidance, that they showed her the future." Maeve felt cold. "Where is she now?" "Still in the catacombs. She has not emerged in years. But I began to question her visions after the equinox, after you disbanded the Circle, so I went to see her." Draven's jaw tightened. "She was not having visions, my lord. She was creating them." "Explain," Quentin said. "There is an old magic, a form of dream weaving, that allows a vampire to plant suggestions in another's mind while they sleep. It is forbidden, outlawed by the old courts. But Leora was skilled in it. She has been feeding the dreams to members of the Circle for decades, shaping our beliefs, guiding us toward the binding ritual. She wanted the prophecy to be fulfilled because she believed it would increase her power within the court." The silence in the room was deafening. Maeve felt her stomach twist with a mixture of anger and relief. It had all been manufactured. The prophecy, the Circle's fervor, the belief that she was meant for some greater purpose. It was not fate, it was manipulation. "Where is Leora now?" Quentin's voice was ice. "In the catacombs. My lord, I can take you to her. Do so. Maeve stood. I'm coming with you. Quentin turned to her. Maeve, this could be dangerous. She used me, Maeve said flatly. She tried to turn me into a pawn in her game. I deserve to face her. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well, but you stay behind me. The catacombs beneath the Palazzo Kaine were ancient, older than the building above. Draven led them down through winding stone passages lit by torches that burned with a cold greenish flame. The air was damp and smelled of earth and age. They found Leora in a chamber deep underground, surrounded by books and alchemical equipment. She looked up when they entered, and Maeve saw that she was beautiful in the way all old vampires were pale and perfect and utterly inhuman. My king, Leora said, rising smoothly. To what do I owe the honor? You know why I am here, Quentin said coldly. Draven has confessed your manipulation of the circle, the dream weaving, the false prophecy. Leora's expression did not change. It was not false. The paintings are real. The face is real. I simply guided the court to see what was already there. You fed them lies, Maeve said, stepping forward despite Quentin's warning hand on her arm. You made them believe I was some kind of chosen one so you could use me in your ritual. You tried to take away my choice? Choice? Leora laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You are human, mortal. You have no choice in the workings of our world. You are a descendant of a girl who saved the king 4 centuries ago, nothing more. But I saw an opportunity. The court was aimless, fractured. They needed something to believe in. I gave them that. You gave them a lie, Quentin said, and there was a weight in his voice that made the air itself seem heavier. You violated the law against dream weaving. You manipulated members of my court. You attempted to coerce a human under my protection. For these crimes, you will be judged. Leora's composure finally cracked. You cannot judge me. I am of the old blood. I have served this court for 200 years, and you have betrayed it. Quentin's eyes had gone completely silver, reflective and merciless. The sentence for dream weaving is exile. You will leave Florence tonight. You will not return. If you are found within the city limits after dawn, you will be executed. Do you understand? Leora stared at him, and Maeve saw the moment she realized he was serious. You would exile me for this? For trying to strengthen the court? I would exile you for stealing choice, Quentin said quietly. From my people and from the woman I love, you treated Maeve as a tool. You treated the court as puppets. That is not strength, that is tyranny, and I will not tolerate it. He turned to Draven. See that she is escorted to the city limits. If she resists, use force. Draven inclined his head. Yes, my lord. They left Leora standing in her chamber, surrounded by the remnants of her schemes, and Maeve did not look back. When they emerged into the palazzo above, Maeve was shaking. Quentin pulled her into his arms and she buried her face in his chest. It's over, he murmured into her hair. The prophecy, the circle, all of it. It was never real. You are free. I was always free, Maeve said, her voice muffled against his shirt. But thank you for making sure the rest of them knew it. He kissed the top of her head, and they stood there in the darkened hallway, holding each other until the shaking stopped. The paintings left the palazzo in stages over the next 3 months. Quentin contacted galleries and museums across Europe, offering them anonymously. Some went to the Uffizi, some to the Louvre, others to private collections in Vienna and London and Prague. Maeve watched them go with a mixture of sadness and relief. They were beautiful, and they were history, but they were not hers. The West Gallery stood empty now, the walls bare except for the faint outlines where frames had hung for centuries. Maeve walked through it one last time before Quentin had it repurposed, and felt the weight of the past finally lift from her shoulders. She was not a prophecy. She was not a face in a painting. She was Maeve Norrell, and her future was her own to shape. She spent the next year doing exactly that. She finished her degree in art history, taking night classes at the university so she could still work at the palazzo during the day. She visited her mother's grave in England and spent a week walking the countryside, saying goodbye to the life she had known. She watched the sunrise from the hills above Florence and memorized the way the light turned the city gold. And every night she came home to Quentin. They grew together in ways that surprised her. He taught her about art and music, showed her the hidden corners of Florence that only the immortal knew. She taught him about the modern world, about technology and social media, and the strange, beautiful chaos of contemporary life. They balanced each other, his centuries of experience against her fresh perspective, his otherworldly grace against her human warmth. By the time Maeve's 25th birthday arrived, she knew she was ready. She told him on a cool evening in October, 1 year and 3 months after she had first found the paintings. They were in the garden, surrounded by autumn roses, and the moon was full overhead. I want to be turned, she said, soon. Before the year ends. Quentin went very still. Are you certain? Yes, I've done everything I needed to do as a human. I've said my goodbyes. I've seen my sunrises. I'm ready for forever if you'll have me. If I will have you? He laughed, a sound of pure disbelief and joy. Maeve, I have been waiting for this moment since the night you told me you loved me. Of course I will have you. For as long as you will stay. Forever then, she said, and kissed him. The turning happened on the winter solstice, in a private ceremony with only Quentin present. He had explained the process carefully, made sure she understood the pain and the risk. But Maeve was not afraid. She trusted him completely. When his fangs pierced her throat, the pain was sharp and bright, but it faded quickly into something else, a warmth, a connection, a sense of two souls intertwining. She felt her human life drain away and something new rush in to take its place. Power, clarity, a heightened awareness of every sensation. When she woke 3 days later, the world was different. Colors were more vivid. Sounds were sharper. She could hear the heartbeat of a mouse in the walls, could smell the roses in the garden from 3 floors away. And Quentin was there, watching her with an expression of wonder and relief. How do you feel? He asked. Maeve sat up slowly, testing her new body. Everything felt stronger, more precise. Alive, she said, then laughed at the irony. Or not alive, but more myself than I've ever been. He smiled, and it was the first time she had seen him smile without the shadow of 400 years of loneliness behind it. Welcome to eternity, Maeve. She spent the next 6 months learning what it meant to be a vampire. Quentin taught her how to hunt without killing, how to move with inhuman speed, how to navigate the complex politics of the night court. She discovered she had a talent for it, the grace, the power, the ability to command attention without effort. But she also discovered something else. She missed creating. As a human, she had never thought of herself as particularly artistic. But now, with centuries stretching out before her and the memory of Quentin's paintings still vivid in her mind, she found herself drawn to art in a new way. She started with sketches, small things, practice studies. And then one night, she set up an easel in the empty West Gallery and began to paint. The subject was Quentin. Not an idealized version or a memory, but the real man as she saw him, sharp and beautiful and otherworldly, but also warm, thoughtful, capable of laughter and tenderness. She painted him in the garden with moonlight in his hair. She painted him at the piano, his hands moving over the keys. She painted him reading by firelight, his expression peaceful. It took her 3 months to finish the first portrait, and when she showed it to him, he stared at it for a long time without speaking. Do you like it? Maeve asked, suddenly nervous. Like it? Quentin's voice was rough. Maeve, this is I have been painted by masters. Caravaggio sketched me once in Rome. But none of them ever captured. He stopped, visibly struggling for words. None of them ever made me look the way you do, like I am worth seeing. She kissed him then, there in the gallery that had once been a shrine to her face and was now becoming something new, a space for creation, for the future instead of the past. Over the next year, Maeve painted more, not obsessively, not compulsively, but joyfully. She painted Quentin, and she painted the court, and she painted the city she had fallen in love with. Her work was raw and modern, nothing like the Renaissance masterpieces that lined the Palazzo's other halls, but it was hers. And when a human gallery in Florence offered her a showing, she said yes. The opening was on a warm spring night, 2 years after her turning. The gallery was small but well regarded, tucked into a side street near the Arno. Maeve had chosen 20 pieces to display, all of them portraits of vampires rendered with the unflinching honesty that only another vampire could achieve. Quentin stood beside her as the humans filtered in, admiring the work, unaware that the subjects were real, and standing among them in the shadows. He wore a simple black suit, and his hand was warm in hers. Nervous? He asked, terrified, Maeve admitted. What if they hate it? They will not hate it. It is extraordinary, and he was right. The humans loved the paintings, saw in them something haunting and beautiful and strange. They did not know the truth that the pale figures on the canvases were not imagined but real, that the artist herself was no longer human, but they responded to the emotion in the work regardless. Maeve stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by her art, and felt a sense of completion that she had never experienced as a mortal. She had been afraid for so long of being reduced to a face in someone else's painting, but now she was the artist, the one creating, the one shaping the narrative. Quentin leaned close and whispered, "There is one painting you have not shown me." Maeve led him to the back of the gallery, where a single canvas hung apart from the others. It was covered with a cloth, and she had told the gallery owner not to reveal it until she gave permission. I finished this last week, she said. I wanted to wait until tonight to show you. She pulled the cloth away, and Quentin went completely still. The painting was him, but not as she had painted him before. This was different. She had captured him in a moment of unguarded emotion, a slight smile, his eyes soft, his hand reaching out as though to touch the viewer. It was intimate and tender, a portrait of a man in love, and in the corner, instead of her usual signature, she had written something else. For Quentin, who saw me when I was invisible. Love, Maeve. He stared at it for a long moment, and when he finally turned to her, there were tears on his cheeks. She had never seen him cry before. I do not deserve this, he said quietly. I spent 400 years painting a ghost, and you painted me as I am. Not the king, not the vampire, just me, Just you is more than enough, Maeve said, and kissed him there in the gallery, surrounded by humans who would never know the truth of what they were. When they finally pulled apart, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, not the face I painted, not the memory I carried. You, Maeve, the woman who chose me. I love you too, she whispered, and I choose you, every night, forever. They left the gallery hand in hand as the night deepened around them. The paintings would stay, Maeve's name on every placard, her signature on every canvas. She was no longer the maid who had stumbled into a locked gallery and found her face repeated across 4 centuries. She was an artist, a vampire, a woman who had taken her own story and rewritten it entirely. Behind them in the gallery's back room, the portrait of Quentin hung in its place of honor, and in the corner beneath her signature, she had added one more line in paint so small that only someone with vampire sight could read it. He painted my face for 400 years. I painted his heart forever. The future stretched out before them, infinite and bright. They had eternity now, the two of them no longer bound by prophecy or obsession or the weight of the past. Just two people who had found each other across the centuries and chosen to stay. And in the empty West Gallery of the Palazzo Kaine, where 90 paintings had once hung, the walls remained bare, waiting perhaps for new art, new memories. A new story written not in oils and canvas but in the living moments of two immortals learning what it meant to be seen, to be known, and to be loved for exactly who they were. The palazzo settled around them as they returned home that night, its ancient stones holding centuries of secrets. But this secret the vampire king and the maid who became his equal, who turned his obsession into art and his loneliness into love, was one that would be told in quiet moments for centuries to come, not as prophecy, not as fate, but as a choice freely made and a future built not on the face of the past but on the living, breathing present. They stood together in the empty gallery one last time, Quentin's arm around Maeve's waist, her head on his shoulder. The moonlight streamed through the windows, painting them both in silver. No regrets? He asked. Nah, Maeve said. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. With me, with you always. And in the silence of the ancient palazzo, surrounded by the ghosts of 400 years, they began the rest of forever, together.